Before bombardiers ever peered through a Norden bomb sight or watched a target grow larger inside a drifting cloud layer, the story of American precision bombing began with a simple question that planners at the Army Air Forces asked in the early years of the war. What single weapon could destroy a bridge, collapse a factory roof, tear apart a rail line, smash a fuel depot, and still be carried in large numbers by every major bomber in the fleet? The answer came in the form of a bomb that would become as common as the olive drab paint on every American aircraft: the 500-pound general-purpose bomb, designated the AN-M64. To understand why the AN-M64 became the heart of American bombing doctrine, you have to look at the demands of aerial warfare in the early 1940s. The United States needed a bomb that was not too light to crack heavy targets, but not too heavy to limit how many could be carried. It needed to be effective against steel, concrete, locomotives, warehouses, bunkers, and troop concentrations. It needed to accept multiple types of fuses, from delayed action to instant detonation. It had to be stable in flight, predictable in its fall, and rugged enough to survive rough handling on the ground and violent turbulence in the air. Out of these requirements emerged the 500-pound GP bomb, a perfect balance between destructive power and tactical flexibility. The AN-M64 had a thick steel casing packed with a high explosive filler that usually consisted of tritonal, a mixture designed to create a powerful blast wave capable of tearing open the structures of bridges, factories, and rail yards. Its design allowed it to penetrate lightly reinforced concrete or steel beams before detonating, making it ideal for industrial targets. The bomb could also be fitted with a range of tail assemblies and fuses that allowed bombardiers to adjust detonation timing. An instantaneous fuse would blow the bomb the moment it hit a soft target like a warehouse roof. A delayed fuse could let it burrow into the interior of a bridge support or locomotive yard before exploding. For crews flying at 20,000 feet, this flexibility was priceless. But the real magic of the 500-pound bomb was not only in its destructive potential, it was in its weight. At 500 pounds, the AN-M64 was light enough for a B-17 or B-24 to carry dozens of them on a single mission. A typical flying fortress might carry 8,000 pounds of bombs, meaning 16 500-pound bombs loaded side by side. A B-24 could carry even more depending on altitude and range. Each bomb was a single punch, but together they formed a storm capable of crippling an entire transportation network or reducing a factory complex to rubble. This changed American air strategy. Instead of sending bombers with a mix of heavy bombs for hardened targets and light bombs for softer ones, the 500-pound bomb allowed planners to standardize payloads while still giving bombardiers the power to destroy a wide range of targets. A squadron armed entirely with AN-M64s could hit multiple objectives at once. One bomb might fall through the roof of a power station. Another might smash into a rail junction. A third could knock out a key bridge that supported an entire stretch of supply lines. The weapon was versatile enough that by 1943, it became the workhorse of strategic bombing. As the USAF prepared for the major campaigns in Europe, from the Ruhr to Italy to Romania, one lesson became painfully clear: accuracy mattered. Dropping hundreds of bombs did not matter if they fell miles from the target. Industrial warfare required precision to shut down systems, choke supply lines, and cripple Germany's war machine. The 500-pound bomb alone could not do that. It needed guidance, it needed calculation, it needed a human mind and a mechanical brain working together to put it exactly where it needed to go. That was where the Norden bombsight entered the story. But before bombardiers ever touched its controls, the 500-pound bomb provided the foundation. The early test missions flown over North Africa and the Mediterranean revealed both the strengths and limits of the AN-M64 without advanced guidance. When dropped from high altitude without the Norden, bomb patterns often scattered across hundreds of yards. Factories received damage, but not always in the places that crippled production. Bridges shook under the blast, but often survived. Locomotives were hit only by chance. These missions taught America something vital. Precision bombing required not only a reliable bomb, but a precise way of delivering it. Still, even without perfect accuracy, the 500-pound bomb showed its potential. When dropped in clusters on troop positions, it produced shockwaves that rolled through trenches and shattered morale. When used against airfields, It tore open runways and ignited parked aircraft. When aimed at supply depots, a single bomb could trigger chain reactions that lit up the night sky for miles. The Air Force's brass took note. They realized with the right targeting method, this bomb could become the sharpest blade in the arsenal. The design also made it ideal for long-range missions in difficult conditions. Its aerodynamic shape gave Bombardiers a predictable flight path to calculate. Its toughness meant it could handle cold temperatures at high altitudes. Its modular construction allowed crews to prepare specific fuse combinations for every type of target along Germany's industrial spine. The result was a weapon that didn't need to be specialized because it could be customized. It was the blueprint for the kind of air war America intended to fight. As American factories ramped up production, the AN-M64 flowed into depots by the thousands. They were stacked in rows like metallic barrels of potential energy, waiting to be unleashed. On airfields in England and Italy, ground crews rolled them across concrete pads and lifted them into bomb bays using hydraulic hoists. The process became a rhythm of the war. Load the bombs, check the fuses, secure the arming wires, lock the bay doors. The aircraft would taxi out, engines roaring, and rise into the clouds, carrying the same 500-pound weapons that crews had come to trust mission after mission. Part 1 ends not with an explosion, but with the image of a quiet English airfield at dawn. A row of B-17s sits waiting in the mist. Ground crews move between them, hoisting dark green 500-pound bombs into open bomb bays. The metal gleams under the muted light. Bombardiers stand nearby, watching, knowing that in a few hours they will be staring through the glass nose of the aircraft, guiding these weapons toward targets deep inside Germany. The 500-pound bomb has become more than a piece of steel and explosive. It is the cornerstone of a new kind of air war, one that will soon push the boundaries of what human skill and mechanical precision can achieve. Before the first 500-pound bomb ever dropped onto a bridge in Italy or a rail yard in the Ruhr, American bombardiers had to master a device so advanced for its time that crews spoke of it with a sense of reverence. It was not radar, not electronics, not magic. It was a mechanical computer built from gears, gyros, lenses, and bearings, all calibrated with such precision that it could calculate the exact point in space where a bomb had to be released to fall onto a target miles below. This device was the Norden bombsight, the tool that transformed the 500-pound AN-M64 bomb from a blunt instrument into a scalpel that could slice apart Germany's war machine from 6 miles in the sky. To understand why bombardiers were astonished by their accuracy, you have to picture what high-altitude bombing looked like before Norden. At 20,000 feet, a target like a bridge or rail junction was no larger than a pencil smear. Winds shifted constantly. Clouds rolled beneath the aircraft. Airspeed fluctuated as the bomber bounced through turbulence. Every variable affected the bomb's fall. Without guidance, bombs scattered widely across the landscape. Precision meant little. Gravity did the aiming, hope did the rest. The Norden bombsight changed that. It allowed a bombardier to measure wind drift, airspeed, ground speed, altitude, and target angle, then compute the exact moment when bombs should be dropped. The device contained a gyro-stabilized platform that kept it steady even when the bomber vibrated violently. The bombardier looked through a telescope, adjusted crosshairs, tracked the target, and fed measurements into the mechanical brain. The bombsight took over the calculations. In the final moments of the bomb run, it even controlled the aircraft itself through the autopilot system called the Stabilized Bombing Approach Equipment. For those crucial seconds, the bombardier flew the bomber. For a young crewman sitting in the glass nose of a B-17 or B-24, this felt like science fiction. During training, instructors told them the Norden could place a bomb into a pickle barrel from 20,000 feet. While this was an exaggeration, it was not far from the truth under ideal conditions. The real tests showed that trained bombardiers could land bombs within 100 feet of the aiming point. That level of accuracy in a world war defined by chaos and uncertainty felt almost unreal. Training with the Norden became a ritual. Bombardiers practiced on mock targets painted on airfields, then on moving platforms simulating enemy positions. They learned to judge wind by the drift of dust on the ground far below.
They memorized the rhythm of adjusting knobs, turning cranks, and watching crosshairs settle smoothly onto the aim point. They practiced until every motion became instinct. Flight instructors emphasized that the Norden was only as good as the man behind it. A perfectly calibrated Norden meant nothing if the bombardier panicked or rushed. Precision required calm, discipline, and trust in the machine. The 500-pound bomb was the perfect companion for the Norden. Its aerodynamic stability meant the bombsight could accurately predict its fall. Its weight matched the calculations built into the bombsight's internal tables. Its shape produced predictable drag. Every variable the Norden measured aligned with the bomb that crews would most often carry. When combined, the two systems created a level of accuracy that no other air force in the world could achieve at that time. The Norden was so secret that bombardiers were ordered to destroy it with grenades if their aircraft crash-landed behind enemy lines. They signed documents stating they would protect the device with their lives. Guards stood watch over bombsight storage rooms on Allied bases. Technicians handled the equipment with white gloves, adjusting its gears with micrometer tools. Every part of the device, from the gyroscope to the optical assembly, was treated with almost ceremonial care. The Army Air Forces believed it was one of the keys to winning the war, and bombardiers agreed. Once airborne, the ritual of using the Norden began long before reaching the target. The bombardier opened the bomb bay doors, pulled back a curtain in the nose compartment, and positioned himself at the device. He adjusted the gyros, cleaned the lens, and checked the shutters. He calibrated the bombsight for the specific load of AN-M64 bombs inside the aircraft. He input altitude from the altimeter. He measured ground speed using a drift meter. Everything had to be exact. Then came the bomb run. The pilot turned control of the aircraft over to the bombardier. The bomber leveled out. The engines droned in a steady rhythm. The crew fell silent except for the bomber's voice in the intercom. Through the bombsight, the world narrowed to a single point, the target drifting into the crosshairs. Clouds floated by like curtains. Flak bursts blossomed around the formation, shaking the aircraft. But the bombardier kept his eye fixed, hands moving on the controls, trusting the machine to do the math. Inside the Norden, gears spun and gyros hummed. The bombsight calculated wind drift, corrected for airspeed, and predicted the exact path the bombs would follow. As the bomber approached the release point, the bombardier watched the crosshair slowly settle onto the target. He waited. He held his breath. And when the moment arrived, the bombsight triggered the release mechanism automatically. The aircraft bucked gently as 16 500-pound bombs dropped from the bay at once. The bombardier lifted his head, exhaled, and watched the bombs fall. From 6 miles up, they looked like silver seeds drifting toward the earth. The granaries of the Ruhr, the bridges of Italy, the rail yards of Austria. These targets were suddenly within reach with a level of accuracy that American crews had only dreamed of before the war. Part 2 ends with the image of a bombardier leaning back from the Norden as the bombs vanish into the clouds below. The intercom crackles to life. Bombs away! The pilot resumes control. The bomber turns for home. The bombardier keeps watching through the small glass pane, hoping to see a flash far below. If the calculations were right, and the bombsight's mechanical brain did its job, that flash would mark the destruction of a target once thought impossible to hit. It was only the beginning. The age of precision bombing had arrived.
When American bombardiers first realized what the Norden bombsight could do with a 500-pound AN-M64 bomb, they began aiming for targets that earlier crews would have called impossible. A bridge only a few meters wide, a rail line hidden beneath cloud shadows, a moving train racing through the Italian countryside, a supply depot tucked between hills. Targets that required not just explosive power, but accuracy so sharp that a single bomb placed in the right spot could stop an entire division. The German military relied on roads, rails, and bridges to move fuel, tanks, and reinforcements. When those arteries were cut, the entire system seized. And that was exactly what American heavy bombers set out to do. Italy became the first true proving ground. The country was a land of mountains, valleys, and narrow passes,
where bridges formed the backbone of movement. Destroy one span and an entire armored brigade might be stranded for days. Beginning in 1943, B-17 and B-24 crews launched mission after mission targeting these lifelines. The challenge was enormous. A bridge viewed from 20,000 feet looked like a thin line scratched across a landscape of stone and water. Turbulence buffeted the aircraft. Flak bursts blackened the sky. Enemy fighters often circled below. Yet bombardiers kept their eyes fixed on the crosshairs. The results shocked German field commanders. Bridges at Florence, Orvieto, and Pisa that the Germans believed too narrow and too well defended were struck with pinpoint accuracy. One bombardier described watching 3 bombs drop in a perfect row across a bridge no wider than a farmhouse roof. The first bomb blew open the roadway. The second shattered the structural supports. The third sent the entire center span crashing into the river below. German engineers swarmed the site afterward, staring at the damage in disbelief. They found fragments of AN/M64 casings, but could not understand how bombers flying so high had hit the bridge so cleanly. Rail lines suffered a similar fate. Italy depended on trains to move fuel and ammunition from the north to the front lines. OSS agents on the ground relayed information about troop movements, and Allied bombers followed those leads with deadly effect. A single 500-pound bomb placed at a rail junction could produce days of paralysis. When dropped directly on the rails, the AN/M64 not only bent the steel tracks, but blasted out the ballast beneath, making repairs far more complicated. German repair crews worked around the clock, but the bombers returned again and again, severing lines faster than they could be rebuilt. In some cases, crews struck moving trains with shocking precision. One mission over northern Italy involved a formation of B-24s that locked onto a locomotive hauling fuel. The bombardier controlling the lead aircraft lined up the target while the train weaved through a valley. As he made the final adjustments, the Norden stabilized, the crosshairs settled, and the bombs dropped. Minutes later, columns of black smoke rose from the valley floor as the train exploded. The attack halted an entire German resupply effort for 2 corps fighting south of Bologna. Targets outside Italy faced similar destruction. In the Balkans, rail lines feeding German forces on the Eastern Front were hit repeatedly, creating bottlenecks that weakened Germany's ability to reinforce the crumbling front. In Austria, bombardiers targeted bridges spanning the Danube and rail yards feeding the German industrial zones. One strike on the Villach rail hub, achieved with multiple 500-pound bombs placed precisely on switching tracks, shut down traffic across the region for days. But nowhere did the accuracy of the 500-pound bomb matter more than in Romania. The infamous oil facilities at Ploiești supplied a huge percentage of Germany's aviation fuel. While the low-level raid of Operation Tidal Wave in 1943 used a different bombing technique, the surrounding infrastructure, including bridges, pipelines, and rail depots, was later targeted with high-altitude strikes using the Norden and 500-pound bombs. These attacks were aimed not just at the refineries, but at the transportation network that fed them. Bombs dropped through cloud layers struck bridges and switching points with such precision that entire fuel lines were disrupted. Each destroyed link forced Germany to reroute supplies through longer, slower, and more vulnerable paths. Germany's response revealed their growing alarm. Railway repair units doubled in size. Bridge construction crews worked night shifts. Anti-aircraft guns were moved to guard previously unimportant rail yards. But none of these efforts stopped the relentless attacks. For every bridge rebuilt, 2 more were struck. For every train repaired, another was bombed on the tracks. Allied planners understood a crucial truth. Modern mechanized warfare cannot function without supply lines, and no supply line could survive a bombardier who could place a 500-pound bomb with such precision that he could hit a turning locomotive or the midpoint of a narrow viaduct. One of the most dramatic examples occurred during the mission over the Brenner Pass, the key route between Germany and Italy. The pass was carved into the Alps and protected by some of the most rugged terrain in Europe. German commanders believed the route was safe because the narrow rail lines seemed almost impossible to hit from high altitude. But B-17 crews using the Norden saw an opportunity. During a clear morning in the winter of 1944, a flight of bombers released a line of 500-pound bombs that walked down the rail line like hammer blows. One bomb detonated directly beneath a critical support beam, collapsing a section of track hundreds of feet long. With the pass blocked, German reinforcements to Italy slowed to a crawl for weeks. As the bombing campaigns intensified, German intelligence analysts tried to understand how the Americans were achieving such accuracy. Some believed the bombs had guidance systems, others suspected spotter aircraft were marking targets. But whenever they examined battlefield remains, they found the same thing: simple 500-pound bombs fused and dropped in the traditional way. The difference was the combination of the Norden bombsight and the discipline of the bombardiers behind it. Part 3 ends with an image seen countless times during the war. A German officer stands on a shattered rail junction, staring at a crater where the switching tracks once crossed. Around him lie twisted rails and pieces of steel casing from AN-M64 bombs. He cannot comprehend how bombers flying miles above the clouds could place their explosives precisely where they would cause maximum disruption. Far overhead, unseen through the smoke, American bombers turn for home. Their bombardiers know that with each successful strike, Germany's war machine grows weaker. Precision has become a weapon, and the 500-pound bomb is at the heart of it.
By 1944, American bombardiers had already transformed bridges and rail junctions into weak spots for the German war machine. But their next targets were far more ambitious. Germany's power did not lie only in its ability to move supplies. It lay in its vast industrial network: the Ruhr steel mills, the oil refineries, the chemical plants, the aircraft factories, the V-2 assembly lines, and the fuel depots that fed every division in the field. If those collapsed, the entire war effort would collapse with them. For the first time in history, strategic bombing offered a way to attack an empire's industrial heart directly. And the weapon that made it possible was the combination of the Norden bombsight and the 500-pound AN-M64 bomb. The Ruhr Valley, often called the industrial lung of Germany, was one of the most heavily defended regions in the world. Anti-aircraft batteries lined the riverbanks. Smoke generators concealed factories behind dense gray screens. Camouflage nets covered power stations and machine shops. Railway yards were protected by flak towers with overlapping fields of fire. Everything the Germans built was designed to survive attack, but none of it could survive a 500-pound bomb delivered with precision. The Americans planned their strikes carefully. The goal was not to flatten whole cities. The goal was to destroy specific components, without which factories could not function. A steel mill might continue running if the furnaces were hit, but if the feeder conveyor belts were destroyed, the plant would shut down. A chemical plant might survive damage to its outer buildings, but if the compressor house or pumping station was struck, production would halt for weeks. These were surgical targets, and bombardiers learned to hit them. In February 1944, the USAAF launched Big Week, a massive offensive aimed at Germany's aircraft production. The Norden bombsight allowed bombardiers to target assembly lines, power stations, and wing factories with a level of accuracy that stunned even senior commanders. Bombs that once would have scattered across surrounding fields now fell directly onto factory roofs and load-bearing walls. One squadron reported that their bombs walked across a Messerschmitt plant with such precision that individual assembly bays were hit in sequence. The 500-pound AN-M64 was ideal for these missions. Its blast radius was wide enough to damage multiple segments of a facility, but small enough to avoid wasting explosive force on empty ground. Its casing penetrated light industrial structures before detonating, maximizing damage to machinery. When dropped in patterns across a target, the bombs shredded production lines and collapsed high-voltage substations. Germany's aircraft production sank rapidly in the months that followed. But industry was only part of the story. Germany's rocket program, centered at Peenemünde and a series of hidden sites across northern Europe, represented a new threat. The V-2 rocket, capable of striking London without warning, terrified Allied planners. The only way to halt the program was to find and destroy the facilities that built and tested these weapons. Intelligence from the OSS and the British SOE pinpointed key sites, and American bombers followed. The challenge was enormous. Rocket infrastructure was scattered across forests, concealed in bunkers, or housed in long, narrow buildings hidden under camouflage. Hitting these targets required pinpoint accuracy. During a major raid on Peenemünde, B-17 formations approached through darkness and heavy cloud cover. When a break appeared, bombardiers used the Norden to lock onto elongated shadows that analysts had identified as assembly halls. They released their loads of 500-pound bombs. The explosions ripped through the structures, collapsing roofs and destroying vital testing equipment. German engineers later admitted that the bombing set the rocket program back months. Additional strikes targeted launch facilities in the Netherlands, where V-2 rockets were moved, fueled, and prepared for firing. These sites were usually small clusters of buildings with fuel tanks, mobile launch pads, and control vans. A formation armed entirely with AN-M64 bombs could cripple such a site if even 2 or 3 bombs struck accurately, and they did. Several launch areas were destroyed before they could fire more than a handful of rockets. German officers tried to relocate the facilities constantly, but reconnaissance teams found them again and again. American bombardiers followed the trail. Fuel depots became another priority. Motorized warfare depends on fuel, and Germany's supply was already strained by submarine losses and severe shortages of synthetic fuel. The USAAF targeted synthetic oil plants at Schweinfurt, Luna, and Ludwigshafen. A 500-pound bomb dropped onto a cracking tower or fuel tank triggered explosions that spread across the entire facility. Bombardiers aimed for the most vulnerable components: valves, tanks, pipelines. Many plants burned for days, some never fully recovered. Even smaller supply depots along rivers and rail hubs suffered catastrophic damage when a few well-placed bombs disrupted their operations. A strike on a depot near Hamm destroyed dozens of fuel wagons with only a handful of AN-M64 bombs. Another mission near Wiesbaden hit a storage area containing lubricants used for tanks and aircraft. The resulting fireball lit the sky for miles. German armored divisions struggled with shortages weeks later. The more precisely Americans struck, the more desperate Germany's defenses became. They added more flak guns. They deployed fighter wings to intercept bomber formations. They installed thicker smoke screens over critical factories. But none of it stopped the relentless pattern of Norden-guided bombs falling exactly where they were needed. A German intelligence officer wrote in late 1944 that the Americans no longer bombed like a blunt hammer. They bombed like a surgeon. Another noted that a single raid could shut down an entire manufacturing district because the bombs fell on the connective tissue of industrial systems, not on the buildings that looked important, but on the ones that mattered. Part 4 ends with a haunting image of a shattered industrial complex in the Ruhr. The smokestacks still stand, but the conveyor belts lie twisted and broken. The power station roof is gone, exposing mangled steel beams. Rail lines leading into the plant are cratered and silent. The German engineer walks through the wreckage, stepping over fragments of AN-M64 casings. He looks up at the sky, still dark with smoke, and realizes that the war has reached a point from which Germany cannot recover. Somewhere hundreds of miles away, American bombardiers sit in their returning B-17s and B-24s, unaware of the full effect of their accuracy. They only know that they dropped their bombs on target. The true scale of the destruction is left behind in the smoldering heart of the Reich.
Long before the bombs struck bridges in Italy or factories in the Ruhr, the story of the 500-pound AN-M64 was written inside the glass nose of America's heavy bombers. It was written by the men who aimed the bombs, who breathed through frozen oxygen masks, who sat alone with the Norden bomb sight
as flak bursts shook the air around them. These were the Bombardiers of the B-17 and B-24. Their job demanded a kind of calm that defied human instinct. They had to stare down at a target thousands of feet below while the sky erupted into black fire outside their windows. And in those moments, they witnessed something that earlier generations of airmen would never have believed true. They could place a bomb exactly where they intended. Bombardiers were the final link in a chain that stretched from the airfields of England and Italy to the factories that built the bombs and the intelligence officers who selected targets. Everything depended on their precision. If they miscalculated wind drift by a few degrees, if they misaligned the crosshairs by an inch, if they hesitated during the bomb run, the entire mission could fail. They lived with that pressure every time they crawled into the nose compartment. Inside the glass bubble, the world was both terrifying and beautiful. The bombardier saw clouds boiling beneath the aircraft, stretching like white plains. He saw rivers glinting like silver threads. He saw villages, rail lines, and roads forming a grid that seemed almost peaceful from above. Yet he also saw flak bursts rising toward him, each one a black flower of death. The glass shook violently as shrapnel tore through the air. Sometimes the bomber lurched as fragments struck the fuselage, but the bombardier held his focus. The Norden demanded it. When the pilot announced beginning bomb run, the bombardier took control of the aircraft. His hands rested on the bombsight controls. The crew fell silent, except for his voice calling out minor corrections. The bomber straightened, turbulence smoothed. The target drifted slowly into the crosshairs. These were the longest seconds of the mission. Enemy gunners knew the bombers had to fly straight during this stage, and they filled the sky with flak. But the bombardier kept tracking, adjusting, calculating. Many bombardiers later described the moment of release as surreal. They felt a sudden lightness as the bombs dropped away. 16 500-pound AMM-64 bombs fell in a clean line, their fins whistling faintly as they cut through the wind. From high altitude, the bombs looked peaceful, almost slow. The bombardier rarely saw the moment of impact, but sometimes, through breaks in the cloud or during low haze, he saw the flash. When the flash appeared directly where he had aimed, it felt like witnessing the impossible. Crews talked about these moments around their mess tables after missions. They described hitting a bridge support beam, a rail yard switch, a fuel depot tank, or a factory roof vent. They were astonished not by the power of the explosion, but by the precision. A bombardier from the 91st Bomb Group remembered watching one of his bombs strike the narrow roof of a compressor house at a synthetic fuel plant. The building vanished into smoke. The plant shut down for weeks. He wrote later that it felt like guiding a lightning bolt across the sky. Even pilots were amazed. They often glanced through the windshield during the bomb run and saw nothing but a blur of landscape far below. They sometimes doubted that anyone could hit anything so small from such an altitude. But time after time, they were turned to reconnaissance photos showing tidy rows of craters exactly on target. They saw broken bridges, collapsed roofs, and severed rail lines marked by bomb impacts no wider than the wingspan of their own aircraft. These images became a testament to the bombardier's work. There were missions, however, when the sky conspired against them. Crosswinds shifted suddenly. Clouds drifted into position at the last moment. Smoke from previous strikes obscured the target. In those cases, the bombardier relied on instinct and training. He adjusted the bomb sight settings quickly, made small corrections, and released the bombs with a trust that the machine would handle the math. Even on those difficult missions, the AN-M64 bombs often landed close enough to cause significant damage. The combination of discipline and the laws of physics was on their side. One story that circulated among crews came from a bombardier over northern France. His formation approached a bridge that German engineers had reinforced heavily. The Germans believed it would take dozens of bombs to destroy. The bombardier tracked the bridge through the crosshairs and released his payload. Only one of his bombs struck the bridge directly, but it hit the exact center of the span. The structure collapsed into the river. After the war, engineers confirmed that placing a bomb in that precise spot had done more damage than hitting the bridge anywhere else. The bombardier never forgot the sight of the span folding like a toy. For many crews, the true impact of their accuracy was revealed only after the war. They saw photographs of the wrecked Ploesti supply bridges, the shattered Ruhr factories, the collapsed rail networks, and the abandoned V2 sites. They realized how their missions had shaped the larger conflict. Bombardiers who once believed they were only a small piece of the war came to understand that their precision helped cut the arteries that fed Germany's armies. Yet for all the destruction they caused, bombardiers often spoke with humility. They knew what their bombs meant. They understood the cost. But they also knew that their accuracy sometimes saved lives by ending battles sooner and disrupting German movements before enemy units reached the front. Part 5 ends with the image of a lone bombardier standing beside his B-17 on an English airfield after a mission. The sun is setting. The ground crew rolls a fresh line of 500-pound bombs toward the aircraft. The bombardier rests his hand on the glass nose, knowing he will soon sit there again, guiding steel and explosive through wind, flak, and cloud toward a target he can barely see. He does not think of destruction. He thinks of precision, of discipline, of doing his job so his crew can return home alive. And above him, the sky grows quiet, preparing for the next mission that will carry the weight of countless decisions, each delivered with a bomb that has reshaped the very meaning of accuracy in war.